Esoteric Discussions, a show that gives a voice to the hidden and unspoken aspects of our world, tackling topics in the realms of the metaphysical, the esoteric, the political, and social. So now join me, your host, Valentine St. Aubin, as I take you on a journey of exploration. Hello and welcome to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host. I am Valentine St. Aubin, and welcome to another show. I'm here every other Wednesday evening, usually from 9 o'clock p.m. But I have been here every week for the last 4 weeks or so. And this is, my last weekly show while we are on 87.7 FM. And I will be returning to my fortnightly slot. But I've been having a great time. I've had some fantastic guests. I'm always so privileged to have the people that I have on my show, and once again I'm privileged this evening as well because I have Ted Woodroffe, who was with me. I've lost track of time now. Maybe about a month ago. And Ted is a healer, and he's back with me this evening, and we're going to be talking more so along the same lines, but going a bit deeper because we did run out of time the last time he was on the show. But we're going to be talking about the world of healing and consciousness and the power of thought. All wonderful, wonderful concepts and subjects to be thinking about in our modern world, especially with where we are on the timeline and how confusing everything is at the moment. Many of us have been getting ill. So if you have not been feeling well, I would like to say that this is a show for you, because there'll be some interesting information for you that you can use. So, and if you don't know very much about me, if you have stumbled across this show this evening by chance, well, I would say that there are no such things as chance in life. Everything in my world is fate. And if you are listening this evening, whether it's live or on YouTube, I get many people on my YouTube channel checking out my videos and things. Please do subscribe. But if you are listening on YouTube, I would like to thank you as well. And of course, information is always timeless, so I always appreciate whoever is listening. But if you are finding yourself listening, then you obviously are someone who is a bit strange from the norm. I'll put it that way. You would need to be to even try to listen to a show with the title called Esoteric Discussions. But I mean, basically, esoteric is just the world of the hidden. I mean, it's a very it's a term that's not used very much in our world today, but it's about the hidden side of life, hidden information. The way that the ancients used to organize information was that you had the esoteric, the inner workings, and you had the exoteric, which was for the masses. And certain information that was esoteric, I say esoteric because I was raised in America, was confined to a privileged few. So the point of my show is to now bring a lot of the hidden elements of what runs our world, what governs our world, out into the open. So I'm going to crack on with the show. I've got some information for you before I bring my guest onto the mic, which is going to get your minds opening up. I want you to listen to this because tonight we are talking about healing. So that includes issues of health and cures and things of that nature. And I'll use the example of cancer, which is something that is within our society quite strongly, and it has been growing quite frequently in the last 100 years. So here are just some numbers for you, okay? Because this is going to blow your mind. In 1900, 1 out of 20 people would get cancer, okay? So back in 1900, 1 out of 20 people would get cancer. In the 1940s, 1 out of 16 people were then getting cancer. That's in the 1940s. In the 1970s, 1 out of 10 people were being diagnosed with cancer. And then since the year 2000, in our world today, it's 2013, 1 in 3 people are being diagnosed with cancer. Now, that's quite mind-blowing. That's a rapid shift of numbers of people being diagnosed with this illness, which we term as cancer. In the US, $50 billion is spent on the treatment of cancer, but not on the cure. And we still, in over 100 years, are officially unable to cure cancer. And I'm going to say that again. We are officially unable to cure cancer, but there have been cures for cancer, unofficially, which is a different topic. The mechanisms that trigger malignant cell growth are still not understood in modern medicine, but yet they are understood within the fringes of medicine, the alternative therapies, those that understand health from an alternative point of view. They have a very good idea of the causes of cancer and how to cure it. So if we take all of that, now listen to this fact, 1 in 3 people will live for 5 years after treatment that you'll get from a regular qualified medical practitioner. So meaning if you get radiology or use of drugs or surgery, 1 out of 3 people will live for 5 years who go down that line. 1 out of 3. So there's 3 people in the studio this evening. There's myself, my guest Ted, and my producer. He's around as well. One of us, according to this statistic, if we were to contract cancer, will be gone within 5 years if we go down the traditional route. And then people 2 out of 3 people who receive treatment in the standard way will be dead within 5 years. So you're not looking at a very high success rate of battling cancer if we look at it from the traditional way. So my question that I'm going to put into your mind, and we don't have to have all the answers tonight. That's not the point of the show. The point of the show is to talk about healing and open up the mind in many areas. But this is just a question for you to keep in your mind. Why is the medical community reluctant and unwilling to use alternative therapies? And just to give you a short history, we would have to go back to the early 20th century just to get an idea of the creation of the medical industry. And we would need to look at the big players. And these are names that you should be familiar with now, with all of the financial meltdown that's happening. Of course, we have J.P. Morgan, Carnegie, Rockefeller. All these bigwigs got together in association with the Medical Association in America. And of course, we would have our equivalent in England and across Europe. And industrialized medicine and turned it into a business model. So lots of things to think about. And I'm going to now open up my guest mic. Ted, welcome back onto the show. Glad to have you here with me in the studio this evening.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yes, fantastic. What did you think about some of those facts that I dug up?
I was listening very carefully, and it's a huge subject.
It is, yeah.
And you got my mind thinking about it now because, funnily enough, over the last few weeks, I have encountered people, well, particularly only 2 days ago, someone who I've lost contact with up until now, has developed a cancer, a brain cancer, and presumably is relatively near death. I've yet to sort of locate him. And I was having a conversation only about a week or two ago with someone about the actual subject of cancer, and her opinion on it is that there is no such thing as cancer. I can't speak for her because I didn't exactly elaborate on what she meant by that, but you have opened up a really big one here, because
I tell you what, Ted, I had a guest on my show a couple of weeks back now, Lauren Delsack, who she's done a couple of shows with me now, and she's just phenomenal. She has opened up my mind in so many ways as well. She's an astrologer, but she had been doing research. This is going back a few years now, and she did research into a doctor who many of us will have never heard of him, because he was basically pushed out of the mainstream completely, which is what they like to do. But he was a medical doctor, but he was also ridiculed for things that he was coming up with. And his take on disease, basically, and he would have agreed with what your friend that you were just mentioning would have said. He came to the conclusion, and his name was Dr. Hamer, Hamer, that disease and illness, it's not really the disease and illness, it's what's going on in the mind due to an event, due to like some kind of shocking event that precipitates us becoming ill, because then, of course, our world crashes in a certain way, and then the negativity in the mind and in the body starts to gain friction, and that's how we begin to get these illnesses. And I think he would be very much like your friend, as I said, to say, well, is cancer really what we've been taught for it to be, or is it a symptom of something else?
I agree that I suspect that it is a symptom of something else. It is a symptom of negativity. There was somebody very controversially a few years ago said that someone had developed an illness because of karma and something that they'd done in a previous life. The trouble is with some people, they speak before they truly think about the subject, and so can offend. There are so many sensitivities in people these days, and particularly about, shall we say, childhood cancers, and cancers when it's a loved one near you. But what I'm pretty certain is that we are not told the truth by government organisations, the British Medical Association, for example, and the groups of so-called experts who sit in judgment over us as a population, and their word goes. And what is so frustrating is that the fact that actually healers are considered alternative already almost puts you on the back foot, because you're not therefore mainstream, you're alternative, you're a second, third, fourth, fifth option. And that's very tiresome, because the fact is healing is the most natural form of helping one human by another, with the intervention of whomsoever one uses as a healer, whether it's angels, whether it's a Buddha, whether it's crystal energy, whatever. So what I would like to see is, and I'm trying to do this in my own one-man sort of way, as I'm sure others are doing, is to break through that monopoly of the doctors, surgeons, etc., who do literally monopolise the area of medicine. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with doctors and surgeons. They're qualified in their own way. They follow a party line. They're not bad people. I think I said to you last time, my doctor, although he was an atheist in one sense, and he said to me he decided to become an atheist because he'd seen too many young deaths, etc., and so he found it easier to cope with if he just didn't believe in an afterlife and a God, etc. He is more of a healer than he realises, and he subsequently started talking about actually going to Damascus, of going to the Mount of Olives, etc., etc. So yes, what you're saying resonates very strongly with me, because it's going to be a huge task to break through this, as I say, monopoly of that they think they're right. They will not in a sense, they don't involve naturally the alternative therapists. Although, having said that, there are healers going into hospitals now. I think there's a London hospital that does accept them as part of. So I think by a natural process, it will probably happen. But it's one of those things where you have to push, little by little, and the door opens and opens a little bit more each time.
And you've made some really good points, and that's the key here, is that it's taken so long for us to get to where we are now, isn't it? I mean, it's just taken so long. I mean, I've just been I've been really getting into the research into, and I love what you said about how people who do these therapies, that it's alternative, it's like a second or third or fourth thought, and I agree, it's a completely wrong approach. But there's a reason as well, which is what I have found doing my own research as to maybe where that comes from. And when as I introduced the show, I had said that of course we had the typical players, the Rockefeller, the Carnegie, the JP Morgan, who and there'll be others as well, but those are always the big names, aren't they, who took the medical profession and the teaching of it, everything, how it's applied, everything, and then switched it up for their own uses and devices. And so people who were using alternative therapies, and these people, these men, they themselves, they dabbled in these things, behind closed doors. They didn't just go and use synthetic drugs like they've been pushing onto the public. They went and had their own healers that they would have gone to, etc. But they changed the dynamic in such a way to then push what we would have called empirical medicine, like looking at the body, making sense of it, and trying to find the right types of cures in a natural way. They pushed that aside, and then pushed through the this whole example of doctors having to be taught in certain ways, and pushing the idea of pills into onto people to cure them. Or it doesn't really cure them, does it? When people are given drugs in this way, it doesn't always work, rather than trying to open people up to the other side. So
the golden rule is the man with the gold rules.
Yeah, absolutely.
Money.
Yeah, and you know what? People forget that, don't they?
Money. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And all of those people you've mentioned, as far as I know, are extremely moneyed and extremely wealthy.
Very
and
wealthy,
so
man. Very
they
wealthy.
can control so much, and it's quite scary. So how do you gently fight back? Well, it'll be a long journey, but the destination will be worthwhile. In a sense, it's not a fight. It's not even a battle, because in spiritual terms, I wouldn't use battles and fights and the idea of violence, but persistence and persuasion and truth and belief and love and goodness, they will save the day ultimately. And yes, you can have all the money in the world, but at the end of the day, if you are dying of cancer, you can be the richest man in the world, but if there is no cure for it, you can't be helped. It's a huge area. It's a huge subject. There's all sorts of ideas of conspiracy theories that the people get together and they have plans for the population, and that there are injections being given to babies who are now being monitored throughout their life.
The tagging
and all this sort of thing. It's along the lines of UFOs and aliens from outer space. Out of every 100 sort of sightings, etc., most of them are dismissed or explained away by the authorities. But out of that 100, probably 1 or 2 actually are genuine. But we get swamped and confused by the way that there is the cover-up going on. But conspiracy theories abound in every part of life, and so I think you can't cover all of them. You just have to concentrate as an individual just on one particular area if you want to fight your way through to getting the truth out there. Or in a meeker way, and perhaps a more spiritual way, is to just quietly work the way you work with clients, with people, putting the word out, and in the strength and the belief that the goodness will win in the end. Mm-hmm. Because we're all only one individual, one little drop in the ocean, and much as we passionately like to expose it all and understand it all and get the honest truth from whoever, we're not actually going to achieve those sort of things as one person, perhaps not even as groups of people. We'd have to be quite a movement.
I think that's very important that people listen to that, and we do make the mistake of trying to pinpoint why things are wrong on these groups of people here or those groups of people there. And yes, we can track where things went wrong by looking this way or that way. But of course, within those groups of people, there's always those within that group who may not agree, who may be fighting from the inside as well. You were talking about UFOs, for example. I did a show last week about UFOs and that type of thing. And, it's not that all politicians are in on the cover-up, or all heads of state. Many of these people don't even know anything about it. They haven't been given the clearance to even be briefed to know the information. So what you're saying is bang on, because nothing is that straightforward. And what has happened in our world is that, from my point of view, is yes, we are sort of one consciousness, and they've spent a lot of time trying to divide us and get us confused and fight amongst ourselves. And medicine and the healing arts is another way to get people fighting amongst themselves. It's like with the medical profession, they don't want the alternative medicines and things to even have clinical trials. And many of the people that practice those things, they've said, hey, look, you know what, you can call me a quack, but why don't you do a clinical trial and come look at my case studies and things like that? Yeah. And you can see for yourself, and they refuse. So it is a really big game.
I think you've hit the nail on the head as far as consciousness as well, because I sense, as who I am and in the field that I work, that there is undoubtedly a growing consciousness amongst people of wanting to discover the truth, questioning more, getting together more into groups of like-minded people. There is an opening up of minds, I'm absolutely certain of it, who are questioning genetically modified crops, for example, questioning conspiracy things such as UFOs, and are there actually aliens or intelligent beings coming from other planets, however far-fetched and whatever it sounds. They are questioning government strategy, they're questioning the money makers, the bankers, there is this movement going on, and it is an inexorable movement that isn't going to stop now. I mean, I'm 51. I'm not an old man. I'm not, wildly experienced of life, except in those 50 years. But there's been this huge seed change of the quiet human, certainly in Britain, who just plods along, goes to work 9 till 5, weekends off, has one holiday a year, Christmas, Easter, blah, blah, blah. Now there is that movement where people are going onto the street. Yes, there are some negatives in the sense of the riots, etc., etc., but there is the exposure happening now, and things are being doors are being opened, politicians are being questioned about expenses, doctors are, there's a lot of litigation, in a sense you think it's a bit of a shame with Britain becoming rather a sort of litigious society and whatever, but there is a movement and there is an opening, developing consciousness from a certain group of people. There's also another certain group of people who actually are still dumbed down. Their minds aren't open, and they will always be the fodder and the lemmings and the sheep that just follow the herd. But there's a large percentage of people now awakening and who have awoken.
And I'm going to go a step forward, and I kind of think, because I agree with that as well, I think also what's making people open up their eyes a bit is because they are finding themselves in positions where they wake up, they're not well, their life starts to fall apart, and the society is not taking care of them or comforting them in the way that they had thought society was. And it's not that society never did that. It's just that we've now moved far away from so many of those nice inner values.
It is a less caring society.
Yeah,
Since I was a child.
It's a less caring society.
Oh, absolutely. There's a difference in hospitals and doctors and nurses.
People don't have time anymore, do they?
They don't seem to, and even within those caring professions, there is a noticeable sea change in that. But I think that's being replaced by the spiritual, caring, healer types of people, and a different sort of consciousness and a different sort of group activity. And perhaps the old values haven't gone, but they've been dampened down rather. And just coming back to the sort of illness and health and cancers and whatever, my suspicion is, just my opinion, is that possibly our diet and our lifestyle and our stress levels are contributory factors, because whilst we have more, we have more in some senses of the televisions, the fast cars and the holidays and the possessions or whatever.
So we should technically be happier.
Technically be happier, but possessions don't make us happy because we've lost our inner consciousness yet again, an awareness of the natural and what and those things that are natural that are best. And I had a McDonald's today. It's absolute rubbish.
Yeah, you feel guilty after it, don't you?
Yeah, it is absolute rubbish.
Body, yeah.
So I'm just as guilty as anyone. But you have got, and I'll probably get sued by McDonald's now, but you've got these companies
that you can have.
Let's talk about general fast food chains. But this food is actually rubbish when you come down. But none of us are going to, not have these things. But even when I was a lad, sort of thing, you would have milk delivered to the door. It was almost as fresh as it possibly could be. And then over the years, there's been this insidious thing where government controls and the need to. I'm sure there was pasteurised milk back in the day, but the goodness is sort of sucked out of the essence of food. It was something with this Hugh Fearnley-Whitting stall. He said about chickens that years ago they had a particular thing in them. Everyone said chicken is good for you. Over the years, because they've been bred so intensely,
chicken is bad for
it's
you.
not good for you, because that goodness, I can't remember the chemical or whatever the protein or whatever it was in them, that has now been bred out of them, and so chicken isn't good for you. These are crazy times, crazy things that we've done to ourselves, that we've done to Mother Earth as it is, and we are messing it up horribly. And it will be the naturopaths who will, the people who go back to nature and sort of, natural carrots and all that sort of thing.
And they actually don't even believe in pills and things like that. They don't believe in that.
To be quite honest, I'm not a great believer in pills. I'm on a series since I had a heart condition 10 years ago, but I don't actually feel that chemicals introduced into the human body are necessarily a good thing. And we're discovering now that we're building up a resistance to them over the years, and they're saying now that if you it's going to happen very, very soon, that if you catch something particular in hospital like the MRSA virus or whatever, we're going to have serious trouble because antibiotics won't work. And so we will conceivably die of something relatively simple, but because the antibiotics don't work. So we are our own worst enemy. Whether there's a conspiracy by a few, I don't know, because the problem with conspiracy theories and these plans that the Illuminati and these people are getting together and planning our lives, well, of course, they're the generations. I'm trying to make sense of this, that you could have a group of people in their 50s and 60s sitting together and trying to plan the world, but then in 10, 20, 30 years' time, they're going to pass away and pass on. So unless there's this continuing conspiracy where it's inbred and instilled into further generations of those influential people, that would be the only way that sort of thing could work, because we're in one lifetime now.
The argument is that they set up systems in a certain way.
Right.
And by design and by habit, we keep going that direction.
Right. That makes sense.
But I know what you're trying to say, and I do say this. I think we have hit that juncture point, that brick wall where those systems that have been in place for so long. I gave the example of those rich guys
Yeah.
who hijacked the medical profession and took it in a different direction.
I think their influence is they're losing
it's
it.
starting to dissolve.
Yes.
Because people are now catching on for themselves
Yes.
and demanding different things. Because
Yes.
we have, whether they like it or not, we have become more educated, some of us, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely,
At least,
yes.
knowing what we want in our bodies, knowing what we don't want, how we want to be treated. And that's because many of us, you're a bit older than me, but, life is tough. Just slightly older than me.
Marginally, I don't know.
but life is tough, so we're having to question things in a way that maybe our grandparents didn't, because life kind of bumbled along.
My grandparents lived until their 80s and 90s, and my grandfather was a dairy farmer. He drank milk almost virtually from the cow's udder, and he lived a long and decent, good life and a healthy life. They would have dripping, they would eat lard, they would eat butter, all these things that people throw their hands up in horror. They're natural, normal, and it did them no harm.
Yeah.
And the shame is now that we have all this processed food, all this processed rubbish. We genetically modify certain, and we don't know the truth of all of what's going into our foods, quite honestly.
Well, they don't want to tell us, do they? I mean, it's...
No, and of course then they will say, well, if we've got to provide food for the masses, then we've got to keep production costs down, so we need to produce as much as possible, as cheaply as possible, and then we've got these wonderful things that will enhance the production, etc., etc. It is rubbish what we're putting inside ourselves, and in one sense we've only got ourselves to blame, because we demand. We have the supermarkets, I won't name them specifically, but we have the supermarkets, we have a demand, and the supermarkets simply fill that demand and supply for that demand.
Sure.
So we're to blame.
Yes, because we need to say, hey, you know what, I want to buy locally.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Make that effort to do that.
But like you say, once it gets into the psyche and it gets into the way of life, it is a real trial to start to turn back. But there is, I just sense it, there is this consciousness heading towards organic, which has been around for a while now, the organic sort of movement. But there is this retro, this vintage, this desire for what was, which is very charming in some ways, because I think people lose direction of what's going on. You notice that radios, for example, and that's a peculiar example, but people like the look of vintage and retro radios. Some cars have become older-fashioned looking because it's charming, and there is something, nostalgia, that's what I'm looking for, the nostalgic element comes in. Now, whether that's of a particular generational age, I don't know, but it seems to be seeping into society that the old values were the good values, the old was good, the made in Britain was good rather than the made in China. I mean, I remember as a kid, made in Great Britain, made in Britain, and we were proud of our manufacturing industry, of our toys that were produced by Corgi and Matchbox, blah, 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 things like that. It is happening, and just say you with your programme, your guests coming in, not just myself but others, and people listening, that is putting more. Each time it puts half hour or an hour of consciousness out there that somebody is saying, hey, think about it. I don't pretend to have all the answers to life at all.
What I was saying at the top of the show. We don't have all the answers.
No,
because it's far too complicated.
But that's what makes life so exciting, isn't it? Because we could sit here for days and days and days talking about all the subjects that are both controversial or interesting, etc., etc. We could literally spend the rest of our lives talking about it. Fortunately, we don't, because we need to get out there and be proactive out in the real world as well as the people who are listening. And you have to live. And one of the most influential men who was in my life, who I didn't mention last time, and I mentioned quite a lot of people, was a guy called Richard Pope. If he happens to be listening, it would be brilliant. But he actually said, I said to him years and years ago, I said, it's very frustrating because I can't seem to sort of break in to having the time for healing and learning more about it. And he said one simple thing, he said, life gets in the way.
Oh yeah, I know that.
And I've never forgotten that, because it is so true. So even now, when my path is what it's on in the spiritual side of life, I still remember on occasions when you have got to go shopping, when you have got to have the car service, when you have got to walk the dog, when you have got to do conventional work to earn some money. Those words have stayed with me right to this day, and will beyond that. Life does get in the way. Also, relationships get in the way. Lack of money can get in the way. Children, friends, etc., do get in the way, and so you have to kind of pigeonhole them, put them in their places, and just do your best. That's all you can do. That's all can be expected of you, to do your best. And if you go to your grave saying, well, at least I tried, and perhaps I made a little difference, then you can rest in peace after you've done that.
And there's just so much there with what you said, but I just want to just elaborate on one further point, which is our beliefs create our world. Basically, is a nice way also to synthesize what you were saying, and if you are approaching the world as if, the Darwinists would like us to believe that, it's a world of struggle, and you have to fight for your right and all of that, that's the world you're going to see. And if you believe that, hey, I believe in a bit of fate, I believe in a bit of, I put my foot out and I can try to create or co-create as I walk along, hey, I have time for everybody, I don't need to step on everybody else to get ahead, you see the world in a different way as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm with you. I think we're going to take a quick break, and I'll get your opinions when we come back. But
okay.
I think, obviously you and I, we're on the same wavelength, but I do think that people are kind of getting tired of that fighting spirit, and they do want to just live, because it's draining. It's a dog.
Oh, isn't it
world.
just?
Life
is a struggle anyway, day to day, to survive on this earth.
So heavy.
Yes.
To succeed.
Yes.
All of the things. And this is why, at the top of the show, I was saying, now 1 in 3 people are getting this thing called cancer. What is that?
I've got to say it before you go to the break, but just because I've got to, otherwise I won't be able to hold the thought. But it is actually that what you put out there, as you say, is what you will, as I would then say, is what you reap. In the sense, for example, I worked years ago for 12 years in 2 inner London jails, in quite a sort of potentially violent situations, and quite a degree of negativity in those situations. Well, since then, my life, since I came out in about 1994, my life changed dramatically from that sort of atmosphere that I worked in into one where there's positivity, healing, love and caring, whatever. And what I find is that I simply don't, and I'll probably walk out of here and get mugged, but I simply don't have any negatives happen to me. Now, maybe I'm blessed, which I know I am in one sense blessed, with my eyes have opened and the gift of the healing, etc., for which I'm exceptionally grateful. But also, I'm pretty sure that what you put out as yourself and how you just think about your others around you and the way you act towards others has a huge influence on how the universe will treat you. That if you put out love, caring and happiness as best, and positivity, then you will inevitably get that back. Now, I'm not perfect. I get niggled. There's a precept in Reiki that says, just for today I do not anger, and I try to live by that day by day. There are other precepts which I can't always remember when I'm put on the spot, but making a living honesty. But the one about just for today I do not anger, I get niggled at people. And I put on Facebook the other day that the precept of Reiki, just for today I do not anger. I got furious in big capital letters. But at least out of that is a positivity, because it's funny, it's entertaining. People go, yeah, you're entitled, you're human to do it. And at least you recognise it. You're not off your head with fury and disconnected from what you really are. You recognise that you are human and what you're saying and what you're doing. And we all have our moments in life that we do get our fingers up at someone who cuts us up on the road. We do get frustrated at the dog barking. We do get niggled at dustbin men making us up at 6 o'clock in the morning, sort of thing. But what you put out there, you will get back in abundance. And I don't get negativity in my life. And like I say, I may be blessed, I may be lucky, but I also believe that if you put out negativity, you're going to get negativity back. If you shout at someone, they're going to shout back at you.
And of course, within that response, you take that into your physical being.
Oh.
And then this is where
it's very injurious.
The illness starts to creep in.
Absolutely. Oh yes, it will get into your bones, into your metabolism. It will get into it will seep into your spirit, your soul, your personality, and it will wound you, and it will cause you problems. And the stress, which the medical profession recognises, is one of the, one of the worst killers in the sense of heart disease, etc., etc. Bit by bit by bit, the more the negativity that goes in, the more you can become prone to illness. It's common sense in a way that's going to happen. Yeah. And so if anybody is listening to, getting what we're saying, I would say try at all times to be positive. Try. It's not easy because, life deals you hard blows sometimes.
Yeah, well,
that leads into my dad, but we could equally have a break. We'll come back to that.
I mean, we're only going to take a quick break for station identification, and then we're going to carry on. So we'll be back shortly.
You don't need your radio or your PC to listen to Peterborough FM. Use your smartphone instead. Just use your browser and connect to www.peterborough.fm and click Listen Live.
Peterborough FM, the station that listens to you.
Okay, welcome back to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host, Valentine St. Aubin, and tonight my guest with me is Ted Woodroffe, and we've been in the studio so far talking about, we've been talking about all sorts of things, haven't we, Ted? I mean, we've been talking about...
we should talk about time, because I can't believe that 45 minutes have gone by. It's crazy.
I know, it is crazy. I just want to, before we carry on, I do want to just put this insert in, because we kind of have to. I mean, and maybe I just want to get your reflection on this, your experience. But we have to say that any cures that we talk about tonight, we can only say that they are suggestions. We can't say that anything that we have discussed will work with certainty. So we can't say with certainty, exact certainty, that your mind will make you sick, or if you think positively, you will heal yourself. We can't give you that 100% proof, but it's up to you to do your research. And if you're not feeling well, you should go to your doctor and have a diagnosis before you do seek treatments in other places. We do have to say that, don't we? I mean, what's your experience as a healer? I mean,
interesting you should say that. It's very, very important to me. One of these things, all of that you just said, actually, one of the things that I always start out with clients is to explain that they should never come off any existing medication that they're on. I like to establish what they're actually on, so that I get a sense of whether that is going to... If somebody's on medication, it's for a reason, so it may help to cure them. So if I come in and I'm doing healing on them, you don't know whether it was the medication or whether it was me doing it. And although in a sense it doesn't matter if they get better, it's kind of quite nice to know which it was that sort of worked and whatever. So the important thing is that people shouldn't come off medication if they're going to a healer, etc. And also, what was the part you were saying about... the fact that we can't say for certain that one can self-heal, self-cure, etc., etc. I think, in fairness, it's fairly common sense that if you have a positive attitude about an illness, which isn't easy, but if you have a positive attitude that you're going to beat it, you're going to fight it, and you're going to get better, you have more chance of beating it than if you're negative about it, because the whole of the body system will sort of go into regression if you're negative, whereas positivity, things come to life, you feel better, the pheromones or whatever it is come to life, etc. And so that's just common sense, quite honestly, out to the audience. With healing, it is known that it doesn't actually matter if the client or the recipient, etc., believes and has a faith. For example, a religious faith or whatever. It doesn't actually matter whether they believe in what you're actually doing, because it's going to work anyway. But again, common sense says that if they welcome, for example, in my case, angelic healings, bring in the angels and the archangels, if a guy or a girl or a woman believes or has a sense that, hey, yeah, there probably are angels, there probably are archangels, blah, 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 and they are open to receiving, then again, common sense would dictate that there will probably be a better chance that they'll be helped than if they're blocking it.
I wanted to ask you, Ted, have you gotten into any of the work of people like Dr. Greg Braden or Dr. Bruce Lipton by any chance?
They don't ring bells, in all honesty.
Well, I'm just going to say this really quickly, which is because this will work with you as a healer. Definitely with Dr. Greg Braden, he talks about the field, because in science, science is making great leaps and bounds as well. We're moving away from the old paradigms of what we understand science to be, and they're going back to the old wisdom, the wisdom of the ancients. And they're proving it to themselves, which the ancients always knew anyway, and they could prove it too.
Yeah.
But Dr. Greg Braden, he likes to talk about this field that exists around us, because we were always told that space is empty. But scientists are now finding, hey, no, it's not empty. There's all sorts of energy moving around in this field around us. Okay, and this is where we get the idea of the matrix and that type of understanding. And so, even though we can say we have to say, in a sense, that we can't say for certain that if you believe that you might get better, that you will get better. What we can say is, if you feel that vibration deeply within yourself, and they say within the heart area, not the brain, but the heart area, if you really truly believe, you can overcome a lot of the negativity and illness you might be feeling.
Absolutely. There was it reminds me of an example of a woman, I believe, who had lung cancer, and she tried the approach of every night laying in bed and targeting in her mind's eye, each and every cancer cell with a machine gun and shooting them. She visualized it, and she did it over a period of several weeks, and the cancer went into remission and it disappeared and she was well again. There are these tales of people doing things like that of the mind over matter. There's no doubt the mind is a hugely strong healer, basically. Like I probably said last time, I'm a very normal, down-to-earth, just one bloke on the earth, okay? Not everything I say is necessarily right, not everything everyone is necessarily going to agree with, but what I've discovered in one small way is that I, as a guy, can channel an energy from an unknown area of the universe. I can channel it down through my hands to people, and at the very least help them. Now, that's fairly cool, isn't it? That's fairly something. But I'm not making it up. I'm not off my head. I'm not crazy. That happens. People receive it. They get it. They improve. I won't go as far as to say, that they're cured as such. Although people are cured.
Some people do get cured.
Yeah,
that's the truth.
Well, that's not some random event. It's something very real to the receiver. I don't matter in it. I'm just simply the channel of them, and at the end of a healing I have no emotion one way or the other. I care, obviously, but I don't have a great leap of happiness, etc. There's just that rather lovely contentment that you've done right, and then you move on and it's done and it's sorted out. But all things are possible. They have to be, because that's what I, in my own little way, have discovered. Well, in my own little way, I want to get that out more and more into the sort of public domain, so people are aware how normal it is, how normal, for example, I am. I don't mind being the face of it if it so sort of happened, because I'm confident enough to say, look, ordinary guy, normal bloke, lived and worked in London, in the prisons, came out, I'm an auctioneer, I like fast cars and classic cars, blah, 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 but I've also got this added dimension to my life, which is quite extraordinary. Let's explore it, let's use it, let's use it for good. Can I just mention my dad? Is that all right? Yeah, just to take the opportunity, because anyone who I had a few hits on YouTube, which was very cool, and thank you. The reason I want to do this is just to mention my father, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. He was 93 years old. He hadn't been in the best of health for quite some time, and he had a wonderful line that was a mixture of jovial and morbid, and he would say to me, "Edward, death would be a privilege." Which made you smile, and yet sort of, ooh, you shouldn't have said that, Father. But he had wanted to leave the earth plane for quite some while. Unfortunately, he went relatively peacefully. He just was making his way up the stairs. The heart gave out, and he laid his head down, and that was that. So whilst I am sad to one extent, I'm also very glad for him that he's now been taken up to another realm where he is genuinely at peace. What I wanted to say to people was, so far in my experience, and I'm not blocking off any negative emotions or the crying or getting upset about it, I do truly feel that it was better for him that he passed on at this stage in life. So I don't feel a deep sense of sadness and tragedy about it personally. And what I would say to people who have had a loss, whether it's a child, a partner, a parent, perhaps try not to be sad, because it is a negative emotion, it is unnecessary. The person who has gone would not want it. Yes, it's very human to be sad and to cry and to mourn, etc., etc. But for their sake and their memory, perhaps consider looking at it in a positive way, smiling for their life, being glad for their life, and being glad that they've gone for a reason into another dimension, and not to be negative. In fact, a lot of cultures celebrate death, and they have the tombs and whatever around in the street, and they live with the people who have passed away amongst them, and they celebrate people's lives. And it would be terribly nice if the British people could learn to do that, and accept it's just part of a cycle of life and death, and then
and I think
return.
That's a nice way to wrap up what we've been discussing this evening, because yes, death is illness and death, they are part of cycles, and sometimes people are meant to go at the time that they go.
Yes.
Actually, not sometimes, all the time.
Yeah.
When it's your time, it's your time. Some people who do cure themselves, or who do overcome their illnesses, they stay because it's not their time yet. So we do have to also take into context the idea of health and living and life within many different ways of understanding.
Absolutely.
It's not just simply, hey, he got ill, I feel so bad for him, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to accept that it is time for that soul to move on as well.
Exactly.
It's complicated. This is complicated stuff. You know? And lots of people are leaving the planet at the moment. As I was saying to you, I think I've lost, yes, I have. I've lost someone each year since 2007. I had a friend, an old friend of mine. He just was in his early 50s. He went to the doctor back around Christmas time, was told, because he couldn't speak very well, he thought he had laryngitis, he was told he had throat cancer. He was dead by April of this year. That story is not uncommon at the moment. There is a lot of that going on. So we need to look at all of these areas with an open mind, don't we?
Absolutely, yes. And don't be sad about death. It's natural and it's expected, it's going to happen. If you're human, you're going to be upset, but try not to be too sad.
And your dad was 93?
93.
So
He'd had a great innings. He had a life. He left a legacy. And he was a good, kind, generous, old-fashioned gentleman, and that I respected so much in him. And he had an effect. And now he's moved on to the fresh dimension and a fresh life.
We've got about a minute left, Ted, so...
It always ends so soon, doesn't it? We could be here for a week or more.
Anything up and coming that you'd like to quickly say?
Yeah, I want to come back again. That would be so cool, and we'll carry on the convo.
That's a given. I'll have you come back, because you're telling me some interesting things.
Oh, yeah, about the Roma caravan and stuff, yeah. We'll keep them hanging and waiting to see for the next episode, eh?
Is there a website you want to give out? Or is it
it's kind of sort of static at the moment, but it is www.namaste-healers.co.uk. and I'm trying to get it updated as rapidly as I can, but
Okay.
you'll hear us on YouTube, folks, and everything like that. And
Excellent.
you'll find me out there if you're destined to do
This will
so.
be uploaded to YouTube, and we get lots of people listening on YouTube to the show. So it's really nice that you guys do tune in on YouTube. And it was great to have you again here in the studio.
It was great to be here.
Appreciate you being here.
Worth the trip.
Yeah. So I'll have you back again.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to close Ted's mic, and I want to thank you for listening once again. And coming up after me is the flip side, so I'm going to move out the way and end the show. But as I always say, until next time, keep your eyes on the stars.